Welcome to the New Do Review podcast, Season 1, Episode 2. We're calling this Ensemble format and Pedigree. I'm doing that for, the reason is I'm continuing the conversation from the first podcast where we kind of got into some territory when it comes to talking about the bands and their timelines, the historic timelines. And so I figured, you know what, there's something to that, because really I was just trying to explain what I like, because I wanted to tell the listeners, maybe what you're going to be getting into in the future. So I wanted to, express, some of the things that I like. And really what it ended up happening is I ended up just talking about history and talking about tour cycles and when albums came out. Sorry, I'm just looking at the mic, just checking to make sure it was recording. Okay, we're hot. Super hot. Okay. And we were talking about when bands were recording, their albums, what the cycles were. I mentioned Nickleback as just like a current example of how the time frame between their albums, it's a few years, it's like 3 years in between albums, so that's like their tour recording cycle, right? So, I was talking about the difference between, the bands of the 70s, I mentioned like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and those fantastic musical icons, and how different that is and how things have changed. And so I realized, I enjoy talking about that stuff. I think there's some value in unpacking history a little bit, really for the purpose of understanding influences, and that's where the word pedigree comes from. Is it's sort of like the lineage of these musicians and how their influence is carried through history. I think that's important. And so that's kind of where we're going to go today. Ensemble format and pedigree. We're going to look at those mentioned bands, talk about how they're, the makeup of the group, how many people are in the group and all that, because that can make a difference. And then their pedigree, and we'll kind of just jam on that and just sort of fly by the seat of our pants, really, because that's how we're going to be doing this. A lot of this is really just improv. It was funny, I looked at the mic for a second because I wanted to see if it was recording. This is technically take 2 on this because I realized that the mic wasn't recording. So there it is. Another thing to mention too is that if you're listening to this on audio, you are being recorded on video, or I'm recording this on video at the same time to upload on YouTube, so that there's multiple copies. There's a video copy and then the podcast audio version, which maybe you're listening on Spotify right now or another platform. I set this up on Anchor a little while ago. I'm really flying by the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just me right now talking. That's going to be how this works. I really just Googled how to start a podcast, and I just followed the steps and got into Anchor and threw in all sort of my bio stuff with my website. So if you're tuning in for the first time, you're thinking what is this guy's like he's all over the place, like spilled milk, right? So who am I, what am I doing there, what is this? We're gonna get into that. We're gonna do some housekeeping. So this is the New Do Review podcast. So why New Do Review? What does that even mean? So to me, that means it's time for a new review of the digital world, which includes music and a whole bunch of other stuff. Because for me, my musical experience makes up most of my life. But also with that is the digital world. The digital world is also sort of in tandem with music and how that works. So we're going to talk about a lot of other things eventually, but today it's going to be mostly just music, especially 70s music. That's going to be the primary topic after we deal with some of the housekeeping stuff that we'll talk about here that we're actually talking about now. So okay, so yeah, New Do Review. That's what it means to me. That's also the name of the blog, newdoreview.com. You can find me on all available socials. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Let's see what else. I'm on TikTok as well too. You can find me. So just if you search New Do Review all as one word, you can find me and very easily contact me if you need. And then you can search me on YouTube as well. Okay, so I guess me. You know, who's this cup of milk? It's me, Brent. BRENT. That is me. So I am the webmaster and content creator of this brand, New Do Review. That's, you know, the entity that I'm cultivating as a digital asset for myself that I'm investing in for the future. And I'm doing this all to see how it grows. And that's another point of this podcast. It's more almost a documentary in a way, to just kind of collect how I grow in the digital landscape. And you know, with this, you have to also do sales and marketing for yourself to get yourself out there. And so there's components of that you know we can talk about. And that's really what this is. You know, I want to be able to share my musical experience with the world, because I realize that as I get older, that will change. My perception of it will change, and so I want to be able to capture who I am at this time in my experience, so that maybe younger musicians, a younger generation, you know, can maybe benefit from the way I think. And, you know, I've had a varied career. I've done a lot of pretty cool things that I'm very proud of, and I'm very thankful for all the people I've worked with. You know, all the people I've been in bands with, people who've helped me grow. It's all been just an incredible journey. And I want to be able to share some of that, and help reveal some of the psychology behind, you know, how I ended up where I am, how I think about music, because some of that can really be insightful for aspiring musicians, or no, I don't like the word aspiring. I guess growing musicians still, you know, learning and getting better. Because it's perspective is a big thing. How you think about things can really make a difference. So I want to be able to share all that with you. You know, for me, I spent most of my life as a musician from 14 onwards, right up until my mid-30s now, playing in you know, rock bands. I recorded a full-length album with a group that I was with for quite a while, and then I moved on and did a composition degree, basically a fine arts degree, a BFA. And I was able to do volunteer work with a music society to help promote local composers. So, you know, I've done, you know, I guess not a whole lot, but, you know, it's enough to look back and go, yeah, you know, I've kind of been in a lot of places. So, you know, maybe I can be valuable, you know, at this point, at least in my age, really, you know, because if there's people in their 20s or late teens trying to figure out how to do music, like, it's hard, man. Like, it's a tough go, but it doesn't, if you know the right people, I guess, or at least if you figure out a certain way to do it, it's absolutely possible, and it's absolutely worth it. Let me just tell you that. Getting on stage and playing your songs in front of people who love it, man, there's absolutely nothing else like that in the world. So there's that to be said. And yeah, so, you know, here I am. I'm sort of the end result of all of that experience, and I want to share that with you. So far, it's just me talking. That's kind of cool. You know, I can talk for a while. This is going to go for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. That's really the maximum of this recording device. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So it's, yeah, we're 9 minutes in. So that's how the format's going to be. Maybe we'll have guests. You know, we'll see what happens. That's all technical, technology dependent, or gear dependent, I should say. You know, you need more gear to record multiple people is kind of the idea. So, okay. Well, I think that's probably enough to give you an idea of who this cup of milk is and how he's spilling all over the place. And if you want to know more, I mean, you can just go to my website and, you know, read some articles and stuff. I talk about music and some other things. I've done an article review for a band from the UK, which is going to be, actually they're from Birmingham, which is where one of the bands we're going to talk about is from. Okay, well, let's do the housekeeping, because that's important, because I like to be transparent on the marketing and affiliate offers that I'm currently engaged with, because that's really the point of me doing this. You know, when I was doing my sales and marketing, a career, that's how I sort of got involved in blogging, and really what this all is, it's me monetizing a blog and building up a brand identity, or an entity, I guess I should say, to have that make you money, to help have passive income come in as you build up this digital asset. It takes time, it takes a lot of work, it doesn't happen right away. It's not something that you can just step into. You know, you got to work at it, so it's a personal investment, and that's really what this is all about. I'm documenting my process of trying to be well, I don't even know if success is a good word anymore for this, because really it's not. It's really about allowing you to do what you're passionate about, what you love, and have that fulfill you in all ways, including the monetary compensation part of it too. So that's really what this is about, and I guess this is maybe a documentary too, to show you how I grow. You know, this is all just being done bootstrapped. You know, I figured out how to do a podcast a few days ago, and here we are. It's literally like this is the second episode, take 3. I mean, I did the first episode in one take, and I screwed up because I didn't hit the record button. So there you go. And then this is the third official take. So I'm just going for it. Like, I don't even know how to speak properly on camera, really. I can't look at the lens properly. I've got a thing here, and I'm holding a mic. I and ah. You know, I say so and like a lot as I'm sort of transitioning into different thought patterns, because it's all extemporaneous. Man, that's a weird word, extempo. Extemporaneously? Yeah. It means improv. So, you know, this is all off the cuff, right? So I'm doing this. But I want to capture these blemishes, because I think they're beautiful. This is where the seams come together, and that's where the interesting stuff happens with content and with artists. It's really that's the magic. So I want to capture all of it, and just that's what you're getting is the product, the content, whatever it is, right? So that, I think that maybe covers it a little bit. And so so the affiliate marketing, let's tie that back into it. So I'm trying to monetize this content with Amazon Associates program. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically just affiliate marketing where you can promote products on Amazon through links that you get, and you put them where they need to be in a web form or a text box or whatever, and if someone clicks on it and they buy that product, you get commission. That's how it works. So it's kind of like a sales gig in a way. You're promoting products, but it's nice because you get to promote the things you want to, right? So the thing about a sales career is that you were stuck selling what you had to sell. This allows you to sell anything you want, right? Because if maybe gardening's your thing, or you're like an outdoors person, and you like camping, you can make a blog about camping and put affiliate links for tents and stuff. And if you're an authority on this topic and people trust you, which they will eventually if you make good content and stick to it, they'll buy something, because they're going to be inspired to do what you do. And so that's kind of the point. And there's some other offers in there that I'll talk about in a second, because really what I'm doing is I'm putting all the gear I'm using in this whole process as my Amazon affiliate offers. So you're gonna see that I'm using a Canon camera. I'm pointing to it. You can't see that audio, I'm sorry, because it's just only audio, but maybe you can hear the pointing. Can you hear it? I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so there's a Canon camera. I've got Sony headphones on. I've got a H1 handy recorder. My cord's getting all jumbled up. And I've got this Dynex stand that's just, that has the camera on. And hold on, I'm gonna move the mic. Is that better? And then this is a running joke where I put my Rubbermaid bottle in here. It's my water bottle. which, oh my god, it's so necessary. If you don't have water, you're just, you're not gonna make it. Sorry, get some water in there. Yeah, so that saved me. So the first video I did, that was kind of a joke, and I joked about it on camera. I was like, and then I thought, oh, that's not a bad idea. I can promote the water bottle I use, because it's a really good water bottle. It's waterproof. I love it. You know, I basically it's something I actually really do use a lot, and I like it. So I mean, if you want a good water bottle recommendation, there it is. So that pretty much covers the Amazon Associates part of it. You'll be able to get those links through YouTube. I'll try and put the YouTube link in the description of the podcast. I don't know if that's going to work. I'm still learning, so bear with me. And then the other offers that I was talking about were related to learning how to play piano. ClickBank is a affiliate marketing platform where you can find appropriate offers for certain types of content that you know, makes sense. So I found a nice offer that teaches piano, and I've investigated, and it's fantastic. It teaches you how to play piano online, basically. And then there is another offer called Singorama, which is a similar online learning platform to teach you how to sing. So I think those two elements, when it comes to just basic musicianship, they're absolutely fundamental. If you're a musician, you got to sing and you got to play the piano. Those are two things that you absolutely must have. The reason is that those two things are fundamental in any university training situation. If you're a guitar player, trumpet player, drummer, they'll make you play the piano and then make you sing. So there you go. Those are two things that I stand by as a musician. That if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, you know, what's missing in my game? Well, guess what? If you can't sing or play the piano, that's what's missing. So, you know, that could be beneficial, and it's there to be informative too. You know, again, these are things that I could get commission for if you click through the links. I'm being totally honest and just open with you, but. You know, those are things that I personally would see valuable to the audience listening to this. And, you know, like I said, if there's any holes in your game, those are the two things that you should investigate to be a better musician, basically. So that's pretty much the housekeeping in terms of the monetary stuff, the affiliate disclosures. What else? You know, we've talked about pretty much who I am, what this is, where we're going. Let's see, we're about 18 minutes in. That took a while, but you know, that was still kind of fun. I hope you were entertained at least through that. But yeah, this is all informational too, and maybe these maybe these housekeeping sessions will get shorter as this goes on. So let's get into it. I've got a little bit of a script. This is really just the description I wrote out for the YouTube video and the podcast. So ensemble format and pedigree. Okay, so let's talk about ensemble format. So what does that really mean? So ensemble to me is, you know, who and what is in the band. What is the ensemble, right? So you know, let's just go for Canada Power Trio, Rush, bass, vocals, guitar, drums. That, you know, that's the ensemble format. It's a power trio, basically, or a trio. You know, and then sort of the classical contemporary equivalent is, like, say, like a piano trio, right? So your piano is like your fundamental rhythm, and then it's two instruments, anything else, like a cello and a violin, clarinet, bassoon, whatever you want, right? So it's just three trio, right? And so, you know, it just goes up the ladder from there. Quartet, 4, and then, you know, 5, 6, 7, da da da. It just goes on and on. So the ensemble can tell you a lot about the band and what you can expect from a band, just knowing how many people are in the band and who's playing what, right? So whenever I encounter a new group, my brain just goes, well, how many people are in the group? I need to know that immediately, because it tells me information that is not really that can't really, the music can't really tell you that, because when you listen to music, it's all a production anyway. So it's hard to tell if that was made by 4 or 5 people. Sometimes one person can record something that sounds absolutely massive, and it's like, well, wow, did like a whole orchestra record that? No, it's just one person. So it's not obvious when you're listening to certain songs the size of the ensemble. So for me, when I listen to any rock music, I guess, or metal that is sort of rooted in an ensemble structure, that's what I pay attention to. So if I hear like a metal song and there's lots of guitar happening, I'm thinking, well, maybe there's 2 guitar players, right? Because that has you can infer a lot of stuff just from knowing that. It's like, okay, 2 guitar players, great. So there's probably going to be some like serious leads happening, some solos, a lot of harmony and melodies, some Iron Maiden-y type of licks, like the way Iron Maiden and like Judas Priest would harmonize in 4ths and 5ths and octaves and all that sort of stuff. Or King Crimson, which is who we're also going to talk about too. How they are set up their harmony and melody, right? So those are all conventions of like a rock or a metal format. But when you know the ensemble structure, you can predict what you're going to hear, and so that kind of it all helps kind of put a bigger picture of the group together in your head as you're listening to it. And like I said, it's not always obvious when you're listening to it what's what. So, finding that out somehow, I think is quite valuable. So, there's that. Okay, ensemble format, and pedigree too. So pedigree is that word. I like to use it because it sort of assumes like a lineage of people, going, I guess, almost continuing a bloodline, but in a way, maybe we can use this more as a path of influence, because that's kind of what it's like. They're, these musicians, they're not, related. They're just, they listen to the same bands, so, they're really only related through their musical taste, and maybe that's how, maybe that's a better way of explaining, I guess, is sort of like how, who's listening to what. Because that maybe it's just the pedigree of musical taste, and that's really all it is. Because when you start in the 70s, right? So we'll get into I'll list off the bands now. We're going to talk about Led Zeppelin, Genesis, Pink Floyd, Black Sabbath, and King Crimson. Because to me, those are like the primary colors of the English United Kingdom rock, progressive rock bands that really. They sort of set the stage for both rock and metal to be where it is right now, because progressive rock to me was that was so profound when I first experienced it when I was younger. I mean, it was in the 2000s, so I mean, I was looking back at older stuff. But that's when I experienced it. It really just showed me like, wow, rock music isn't just a simple like AC/DC type of rock. I use AC/DC as almost a meme, or sort of like I don't even know what to say, like a catchphrase. For simple rock music. It's not simple. I'm not saying it's like that. It's actually quite complex in various ways. But the song structures, they had a formula to it. But these progressive rock bands like Genesis and Pink Floyd, they were unlike AC/DC in every possible way. The songs were longer. They had very intense structures. A lot of the stuff, especially Pink Floyd and Genesis, really bordered on classical music structures, where they had large sections. There's interludes, things like that. and just other forms. I don't want to talk too much about form because that's like A, B, A, C, D, you know, that sort of thing. You know, but these bands put a lot of thought into the structure of their songs in ways that, you know, other bands, you know, just using AC/DC as an example, mainly because they're popular and everyone knows who they are, and you know, you could just imagine a song in your head. They were unlike that, and Led Zeppelin is a good example of that too. Led Zeppelin was. They had their rock songs that were simple, but they also did things in their later career that were just like absolutely incredible. Led Zeppelin was one of the first iconic bands that I experienced when I was younger. Watching the film, The Song Remains the Same. I think that's the right name, but you know, it's their live concert where it's a mixture of them playing live in these sort of cinematic. I guess videos of the band members, and it sort of made each band member a character in a way, and it was all very symbolic as well. And so that was really my first experience with Led Zeppelin in a sort of a progressive type of performance, I guess you could say, because they played extended versions of their songs, like Dazed to Confused. Dazed to Confused is actually a short song on, you know, their early records, right? But it's like a super long song when they play it live. You know, they're expanding the compositional structure, and they're turning it into a performance. So you know, really, it's more like a live a thing. Like it's a live music convention in a way, but still, it plays into a compositional structure. Because you know, the band has to know, okay, we're going to go into this section next and all that. So there, you know, there's a lot of forethought to make that happen. But that was my first introduction to a band that was trying to do something irregular, I guess. And you know, and that was in the 70s, a long time ago. And when I saw that, it would have been maybe the early 2000s or the late 90s, maybe 99 or something. You know, I was just a teenager. And so having that realization of progressive rock was pretty profound, and it sort of pointed me in a very specific direction, which is, you know, Genesis, King Crimson, Pink Floyd, and you know, those types of groups, Black Sabbath, right? So to me, those bands, really, they're kind of like the primary colors of rock and metal and progressive music. You know, all the, as far as I know, all the bands that would be claimed as a progressive rock or progressive metal band today, they would know who Led Zeppelin is, Genesis, Pink Floyd, Sabbath, and Crimson. Like those are just really common names when you deal with you know, musicians in that genre of music. But I want to talk about them not because they're popular, but it's because they are so important in terms of understanding the, just, you know, we'll go back to the word pedigree, like the lineage of influence and their music, you know, because they had different ensemble formats too, and so they fit in nicely into the ensemble format discussion. And they fit into the previous discussion of tour cycles, right, from the last from the first episode, from the last one, whereas, you know, these bands are putting out an album every year, and so within 5 years they've got, like, you know, a huge recording database, right? They've got a lot of songs recorded already, and it's just incredible. And you know, there hasn't really been anything. There hasn't really been anything like that since the 70s. The 80s was its own thing. It had a lot of pretty incredible bands, primarily metal bands, at least for me, but also other types of artists. You know, like Peter Gabriel really came out in the 80s too. He's part of the Genesis connection, and so, you know, maybe we'll get to that. But yeah, let's stay in the 70s for a little bit. So, you know, I talked already about Led Zeppelin. Maybe we can move on to the other bands. But yeah, Led Zeppelin, that was kind of the first group that was just like, here's 4 guys on stage just absolutely like killing it. Like they know their instruments inside and out. They're masters of their craft. They've turned themselves into characters and symbols. They have their own symbols, you know. So that was to me, that was just like, what, these they're magicians, but really, that's kind of how I saw them. It was larger than life, and you know, all their whole discography is it's incredible. I was lucky enough to acquire all their CDs through used music stores locally here in Vancouver, and I listened to them chronologically, and it was, man, like, what if you hadn't had the chance to do that and listen to Zeppelin from the beginning to the end, you should do it. You know, if Spotify definitely has all those albums, just listen to them in chronological order and just see the progression of Zeppelin. It's absolutely incredible, because once you get past Zeppelin 4 into the House of the Holy, and then into like Physical Graffiti and Presence, it's like this is like an art it's like an art rock thing, but there's still a blues, like a blues rock, you know, heavily influenced by that. Still rock and roll, but man, they did some absolutely incredible things. And so, you know, you can kind of go back to, when you look at Zeppelin, they're going to give you all of the steps in terms of, you know, what to do and what not to do to be a rock band. Like, they are the rock band. Singer, guitar, bass, which is also keys too. That's another thing to be said. And drums. You know, the quartet, the power quartet. You know, there's the power trio, like I was saying with Rush, where the bass player sang, guitar, drums. Zeppelin and Sabbath as well. We're going to get into Sabbath next. That's like the power quartet. And when you look at bands that are in that format, so let's say, I don't know, you know, Alice in Chains and say Stone Temple Pilots. So, you know, those are pretty solid late 80s, 90s bands. Guitar player, bass, drums, singer. That's the same format, right? So, you know, there's a little bit of an expectation in that. It tells you kind of what to expect. But Zeppelin kind of, at least from my perspective, you know, other people will have different perspectives too. Keep in mind, you know, Zeppelin may not be the one and only, but for me it was, because that's really what I saw first. And you know, maybe there's other musicians that'll agree and be like, yeah, you know, Zeppelin, that's the big quartet, you know. But on the other end of it, it's Sabbath, Black Sabbath. Because they're fundamentally different than Led Zeppelin. They're to me, that's like the first metal band when it comes to 70s. You know, there are other metal bands too. You know, there's like the Scorpions. You could say that they're another 70s kind of proto metal, if you want to say it like that, or like an early version of heavy metal. Judas Priest fits into that because you know, they're from the same era. But Sabbath to me represents the sort of the anti rock format, you know, because Led Zeppelin was like, you know, rock and roll. You know, they were kind of like the you know, almost like a pop band. You know, everyone knew them. You know, they had a lot of exposure. Everyone knew Led Zeppelin. Black Sabbath was, I guess, maybe you could say that they were an underdog. I don't even know if that's even appropriate, because I wasn't born in the 70s. I was born in the 80s, so I wasn't even there. But it's just my perspective on history and how I'm looking at them now, and talking about it. Because they're heavier. Like, they don't sound like Led Zeppelin. The riffs are heavy. The distortion's huge. It's a different sound. And to me, when it comes to metal, like it's Sabbath. Like, you know, their first like 5, I would say, pretty much every album that had Ozzy on it, right up until the late 70s was great stuff. You know, Sabotage, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Like, man, those are just really good heavy duty albums, because the Sabbath did a lot of cool things, not just with their heavy riff. It's just they did stuff with song structures and you know, orchestration and overdubs. You know, they incorporated a lot of acoustic guitars and synthesizers and other things to to make a big sound. Like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath had a lot of acoustic guitars on that record. And that's not really metal, like, you know, quote unquote metal. I did the quotes on the audio, so if you can yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was weird. But yeah, so you know, think about that. Like Sabbath was doing a lot of creative things in terms of the, you know, the recording. Like the first few records were it's just like rock. You know, like Paranoid is to me one of the best like early heavy rock or you know early metal records. It's like you can't even do that. Like there's no way that any band could ever do something even close to that nowadays. I hope that gets me in trouble, because if there is a band that's doing that, I haven't heard it, and I want to hear it. So you know, come fight me, I guess. Like there's an element of live tempo to that album that just doesn't exist anymore, because everything is so organized in terms of like tempo and overdubs and recording. Like recording method has come a long way, and so that's another thing to consider too. Like you know when Sabbath went into the studio, you know I'm not an expert on how they record the albums, but when you hear the album, you know that there you feel the live tempo, like the tempo changes a bit. You know, like the drums and bass, they're so connected together. And for me as a musician, especially a bass player, I would listen to Sabbath, and I would listen to Geezer Butler's bass lines and just be in complete awe of the not only him playing the bass, but his connection with the drums. That is the absolute thing. You'll know a good band when the bass and the drum player are they're one unit. Like they function as like a one thing. The bass never should follow the guitar exact. It does in certain situations, like say Pantera, where they're doing it intentionally to thicken up the sound. But generally speaking, the bass should always be more closer to the drums and not to the guitar. But Pantera does that too. You know, if you're familiar with them, it's you know the Rex and Dime. They're not always doubled. Like they're doing a lot of different stuff. But I only use that as an example, because a lot of the stuff is sort of in unison. And a lot of metal is unison, which means that you're playing the exact same thing. But when it comes to bass and drums, the Sabbath, the bass playing of Sabbath and the riffs of Sabbath, there's always like every member had their own the musical member, not Ozzy singing, because singing is a whole different thing. But the bass guitar and drums of Sabbath, they're always kind of in their own space. Like they connected, but listen to their parts in isolation if you can in your mind, and you'll slowly realize that they've got their own thing going. And Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin does that too, right? So when you listen to the bass lines connected with the drums, you see that they're functioning very closely together, but they're still separate entities, and so that's an important realization to have when you're a bass player or a guitar player in a rock band. Is you can't just play the same thing. You have to sort of have a variation on it, and that plays into contemporary composition and orchestration. Is unison is an effect, but you can't overuse it. You have to blend things in certain ways and have different rhythms and things like that. It's one tool of many compositional tools. So Sabbath for me, especially Paranoid and their albums after that, it showed me that there's a live element to those sounds that would have been only captured because the band was just firing on all cylinders. Like they had really good chemistry, and they captured it in the studio in the best way that they knew how at that time, and that's really that's the sound. I'm going to check the time. Okay, 39 minutes, cool. I lose track of time when I talk about Sabbath and Zeppelin. It's just I'm in a vortex of like enthralled awe, because if I say Sabbath, it's like like I hear the riffs and it's it's awesome. But yeah. So I mean that's Sabbath. I mean, and from going forward, like say, let's take Pantera, right? So Pantera is like the next evolution in metal in the '90s, right? So Pantera relies heavily on Black Sabbath in terms of fundamental metal riffs and things like that. And so you're gonna find as you go through the influence of bands, who they're listening to, and you're always going to end up like Black Sabbath is kind of like the Kevin Bacon of metal. It all points back to Sabbath to some degree. There's going to be bands that focus on other sounds as their influence because they're in a different genre, like say maybe stoner metal or like a more bluesy metal or really hyper progressive stuff that's really super technical. They may lean towards other influences, but Sabbath somehow it connects to a lot of bands. So to really understand the history of Sabbath and Zeppelin, I think, can take you very far to know the expectations of really a rock band, how they existed, how they functioned. The touring cycles, like I brought up in the first video, how that can impact a band. Because if you're in a rock band right now, and you're like you've recorded an album, it's like, well, what do you gotta do next? Well, you gotta go play shows to promote your album, right? So you gotta try and go on tour, book shows, right? And so, knowing that that's your path, that's extremely helpful, because you can't just make an album and then sit on it. You've got to go play it, play shows. That's probably obvious already. It's not something to belabor, but knowing that there are cycles and seasons, I guess you could say, of recording, touring, and promotion, that's a valuable realization. And then you get to actually see the patterns, the historic patterns of how the bands did it. They would record in a certain season, go play shows, probably in the summer because of the weather, right? You don't want to be playing in the cold. That's a bummer, right? If it's raining and stuff. So that's another thing too. Is when did they tour? Van Halen toured a lot during the summer seasons. And you want to go out and see a live show when it's warm. So, those are things to consider too. We won't talk too much about Van Halen because they're really more of a late '70s, early '80s group. But they do fit in because they really came in at the end of the '70s to kind of pretty much blow the doors wide open for the '80s metal. That's the way I see them, and that's probably how most people think of them too. So okay, so Sabbath, right? So you gotta know Zeppelin, gotta know Sabbath. For me, Pink Floyd is kind of the next band. Largely for me, I see them as just a progressive rock band. Some people may think they're more pop rock or popular, you could say, because everyone knows who they are. But for me, like, when you look at the early Pink Floyd recordings, like early '70s, late '60s, like that was some experimental stuff, like really bizarre, like Saucer Full of Secrets. What? What does that mean? For me, actually, the first album I heard of Pink Floyd was Dark Side of the Moon. For most, that could be the case. So that introduced you to a few to songs that are sort of well structured, shorter, I guess, but the whole album is almost like one big track, and it's just cut up into songs. And that's an interesting thing to observe because albums before then were just the song, you play the song and fade out, go into the next song. But for Pink Floyd, it's just one continuous song, very thematic. And so Pink Floyd to me introduced that concept. And from there, it was cool. Like, you sort of take that for what it is. You're like, wow, that's pretty awesome. Everything just blends into each other. It's just one big thing. And it really, the only tracks are divided so that you can, what songs are which, like the song names and stuff. But once I got to the Umaguma album where they had like a live. It was just them live, and it was right after Sid Barrett left and they became a quartet. where it was just trying to think of the names. Oh man, this is ridiculous. I gotta look up the names now. Nick Mason, Richard Wright. If I can do this, Dave Gilmour and Roger Waters, right? So yeah, so the quartet, you know, bass, guitar, keyboards, synth, drums. So another quartet, but a differently structured quartet than Sabbath or Zeppelin. So everyone sang. That was a key thing. Roger and Dave Gilmour and Richard Wright, they sang triple harmony, and that was another fundamental realization where you would hear these vocal harmonies, and they're so beautifully thick and luscious, and you realize how do they do that? It's really like Dave Gilmour and Richard Wright singing in harmony together with Roger Waters, and or Roger Waters would sing a certain way, more maybe abrasive, and then you have like the more angelic, sort of cleaner style of vocal from Dave Gilmour and Richard Wright. Well, I should look up if that's even the correct. This is embarrassing because I should know Pink Floyd by now. Yeah, Richard Wright, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, Dave Gilmour. Yeah, I know this stuff. I've listened to a ton of Pink Floyd. So you start to realize the vocal structure at that point. You've got three singers, but they were sort of standing in the shadows of Syd Barrett. Like Syd Barrett was the lead singer, right? So what ended up happening after the first album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, the rest of the band had to take up vocals basically, and so that's a weird experience for the band members, because they may not have expected to be singing, but then they found themselves in a position where they didn't have a singer, and so they have to sing. And Pink Floyd, from their early albums, you get to see that grow and change. I've got my phone here. I'll pull up all the album names so that I can be super accurate and not embarrass myself like I already did. I should know this stuff. Oh yeah, so okay. So Piper at the Gates of Dawn was 67. That's when they had Syd Barrett. And Saucerful of Secrets, 68. Then there was More. That was, what was that? It was like a soundtrack album. I'm not too big on that one. And then Umaguma. That was, so Umaguma had a live, it was a double disc. So they had the Umaguma album, which was, each member wrote songs to make an album. It was a very strange concept. It was almost like everyone had a solo album on the album, put it together as an album. But they did a live thing, and they played a song, "Careful with That Axe, Eugene." And I remember hearing that for the first time, and it crushed me so in such a big way. Like my brain was just squashed by the power of this live performance, and it didn't have any vocals in it too. It was just sort of like a crooning by Roger Waters. Cause I think he was singing, because I remember seeing a live performance, and there's no vocals. He says, "Careful with that axe, Eugene," and then it kind of climaxes. So you had very strange song structures being introduced by Pink Floyd, the early Pink Floyd, that were unlike Sabbath or Zeppelin, and it makes you think. Because when you compare that to Dark Side of the Moon, these are more sort of well-formed songs that are, with a structure, proper vocals. But really, Pink Floyd, before that, they were doing instrumental songs, long, huge instrumental things that were more orchestral in a way, instead of more, like rock, popular rock, that kind of stuff. And it gives you another sort of a look at how a band can make music, basically. And that to me, that's the progressive rock foundation. Is they're taking it to the next level. They're choosing song structures that are not normal, and they're extending things. They're adding jamming. They jam out and extend certain parts. And they include all that, and that's sort of what Zeppelin did as well too in their live performances. So there's these parallels happening, but Pink Floyd, that was kind of their identity, and they grew as a band in fantastic ways, because once you get into Atom Heart Mother, that was a weird album because it had a lot of strange like acoustic songs and almost sort of Muzak like soundscape type of songs, but they had like the one big long song, which is Atom Heart Mother, and that's sort of like a theme that they continued into the next album, Metal, where they had the like Echoes is like the big huge long song, and they sort of had that theme carried on into the next albums. You Wish You Were Here has a big long song, and that was kind of almost like a thing that they had for a little while. And you could expect that from Pink Floyd, is these huge long songs, because they would do encores. They would play Atom Heart Mother as like an encore. That's like a 20-minute song. So like, wow, right? That's like that's like a quarter of a set. Or they would play Echoes or something like that, right? And so that gives you an interesting a look at the ensemble format, right? And a little bit of Pedigree. Because really, when you think of Pink Floyd, everyone, at least everyone I know, knows Pink Floyd. Or there's people my age, I guess. I shouldn't say everyone, because that's not a good statement. But people my age and older, they're gonna know their Pink Floyd. It's like, oh yeah, I got my favorite Pink Floyd song. The Wall. Like for me, Wish You Were Here is probably one of their best albums. That's got a lot of really cool tunes. They became more of a fully structured band at that point after they did Metal. Yeah, like just really really cool stuff. And Dave Gilmour's guitar playing, right? So that has another incredible component, is his solos, like his solo, like the Comfortably Numb solo, or the solo from Another Brick on the Wall, like absolutely incredible musicianship. Roger Waters is a songwriter and a visionist, really. The vision for The Wall as a concept album, you're speechless. I'm speechless when it comes to like, how do you describe that and how do you feel? It's just wow, complete awe. And with Pink Floyd, that kind of leads into the more progressive areas of Genesis and King Crimson, because those are two other bands that are also progressive rock, but they're sort of they sound different. Like King Crimson sounds really far out and very experimental, but Genesis is more, it's kind of got a folky theatrical part to it, because the songs are quite progressive and strange and odd. There's long songs and there's weird short songs as interludes. It feels more like a symphonic structure, or at least the format, I should say, because symphonies have certain introductions. There's formats and with a symphony, so you've got like the intro, and yes, I won't really talk too much about that, but yeah. So Genesis kind of goes from the Floyd, and then you've got King Crimson as the other two progressive rock bands, and the Floyd, Genesis, Crimson, like they all sound completely unique. Like they don't sound like each other, but they are progressive rock, experimental type of groups. I'm just going to check the time. We're at 53 minutes. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. So I think we can do that. But and then you've got Genesis that also did a concept album like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and so the Floyd and Genesis had these very very highly structured concepts as their band vision, and the music really you could see that it was they crafted things that they loved as well too. Like they put a lot of effort into all that music, and you really, when you listen to it now, like to me you can't really come close to that. For modern bands, because really like The Wall, or at least the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, those kind of set the standard for concept albums, right? Like if you're a band right now and you're working with a producer, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do a concept album, like the producer in their brain is gonna be thinking, okay, well, how's that gonna how are we gonna model that against what already exists as concept albums? That's kind of really what would be going on. And the band should, they should recognize the types of music that came before them. And if, like I said at the beginning of this, the message I want to put out to musicians growing, it's like, yeah, you really should know the music history and who did what and when and how. And that's what really this is all about. That's why I'm talking about these bands in this way. It's so that you can go back and listen to these albums that are just gonna, take you to new levels. Because if you haven't heard Lamb Lies Down on Broadway or The Wall, like, you are in for a treat. You are gonna have such a good time. In fact, I envy you because I can't go back and listen to it for the first time. I can't have that experience again. So there's that. So Genesis, we may get into that in the next episode too, because we're running out of time, 55 minutes. Because Genesis is such an interesting band because of Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins. When we say those two names, we know them more for their solo careers and not necessarily Genesis. But Peter Gabriel was the lead singer of Genesis, right up until, I don't know the exact time frame because I'm sort of on the spot, but late 70s, and then Peter Gabriel went off and did a solo career and became extremely successful just on his own, and Phil Collins did the same thing. But Genesis was kind of the melting pot for both of them as musicians, and the music is absolutely incredible. English progressive rock. In the same vein as Pink Floyd in a way. They were like late 60s, early 70s. Pretty much all during the 70s, doing incredible stuff. King Crimson is the same. They exist in the same time period, like late 60s. The first album came out in 69, and the Court of the King's. I'll look that up here just so that I'm accurate. In the Court of the Crimson King. Oh my God! On video, you'll be able to see me scatter back into my phone as I look at this stuff, but on the audio I'm just talking so that I can buy time to look at their album time frame, because I'm just on Wikipedia on my phone. Yeah, so in the Court of the Crimson King, 1969. So yeah, late 60s, and so they cranked it out throughout all the 70s, and that's a varied type of ensemble format where it was guitar, drums, bass. The bass player was the singer, and then you had some keys, synthesizers, and whatnot. And band members sort of came and went, so it was like almost a revolving door of musicians. But Robert Fripp, the guitar player, was sort of the main standby visionary of the group. So when it comes to format, you've got very very interesting examples where you've got the Sabbath and Zeppelin, where they're more characters, very specific identities in that quartet. Then you have Pink Floyd, which was they became sort of a group out of at least the same developed out of necessity, and they became a structured quartet that way with 3 singers. And then Genesis was kind of it was basically vocals, guitar, bass, keys, drums. So you had a lot of it was like a bigger format. I'm going to go back and look at the Genesis. I know it in my head, like it's my memory, because I'm just juggling so much information right now in my head. It's Phil Collins on drums, Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett on guitar, Tony Rutherford. I think that's the other one. Oh, this is brutal. But it's kind of funny. So Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, 74. 1974, right? Like, holy smokes. The 70s was just an incredible collection of incredible stuff. So, okay, so yeah, Phil Collins drums, Tony Banks, mainly the piano, synth, Mike Rutherford bass, Steve Hackett guitar, Peter Gabriel vocalist. So yeah, 5 people. And then King Crimson was sort of basically that format, but the members would change. But those members of Genesis were sort of like the core group for a while. And so that's an interesting thing too, is who is in the band, who are these iconic people. You kind of end up becoming like a character after a while. But King Crimson avoided that just due to the changing members over time. You know, which happens. That's not an abnormal thing when it comes to music. People come and go. They have different agendas for their career. And actually, the first bass player, Greg Lake, he went on to do Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So he went on to be largely successful as a musician. So I'm going to go back to King Crimson on my phone. I believe it was Greg Lake, bass player and singer. Really good singer too. And then, yeah, so Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I wouldn't really talk about that, but I mean, that's another incredible band that you should check out. Because it's basically a trio. It's bass, keyboards, and drums. Like, that is super, super weird. Well, not really weird, I guess. I mean, to me, that's really normal, but I guess it's weird in the context of these other bands, basically. That is, like, you know, very, very guitar driven, I guess you could say. That's the point of, especially, you know, Sabbath or Zeppelin, where it's like the guitar riff, you know, where you have like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, where it's keyboards and bass, right? So there's no guitar riffs. It's a whole different experience. And King Crimson too evolves their band members when they start to get into like Adrian Belew and oh boy, the magical bass player Tony Levin. Yeah, Tony Levin. And Tony Levin actually played bass with Peter Gabriel too, for a few albums. So Tony Levin is kind of like a connection between Genesis, Peter Gabriel, and King Crimson. So it's an interesting relationship that you'll find as you uncover these. When you go and do the research, you'll see that there's so many commonalities, especially when it comes to relationships musically, with these bands that I mentioned, and you'll have an interesting time just learning about these bands. Really, it's a lot of fun. So, here it is. Finally, I got to it. I was just scrolling manically, kind of confused because I was talking at the same time. But Greg Lake, yeah, sorry, Greg Lake. Can't remember what I would do. I don't even know what I previously said, Peter Lake or something great, but Greg Lake, yeah. So the bass player singer on the first album went on to do Emerson, Lake and Palmer's. So where are we at? An hour and 2 minutes. So I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to talk about. You know, because we got to see how each of these 5 bands have different ensemble structures. Like they're different, but they're somewhat similar. And you know, when it comes to influence, well, I guess we didn't really talk too much about Pedigree, but I mean, maybe that doesn't matter too much. But really, I guess the main point is that these are, I consider them primary colors when it comes to influence with rock and metal. So maybe that kind of hits home run on that. Is that, you know, if you're a musician right now and you're engaged in, if you're trying to write original rock or original metal, or, you know, I guess anything rock oriented, you really need to have the knowledge of these bands. I mean, I recommend that you listen to absolutely every single album of these bands. Yeah, it seems like a daunting task. Like, go listen to all these Zeppelin albums, all the Sabbath albums, at least all the ones with Ozzy. I'm sort of, I guess maybe I am an elitist with Sabbath. Like, I like the Ozzy albums. I don't like the albums without Ozzy. But actually, no, sorry, I'm wrong. Dio, Ronnie James Dio, he was awesome with Sabbath too. So those are good ones. Heaven and Hell was really good. Anyways. So yeah, you gotta listen to all the Zeppelin, all the Sabbath, all the Floyd, all the Genesis, and all the Crimson. And if you do that, you are gonna have quite the database of music in your head. Because all those bands have done a lot of great things. And, you know, like I pointed out with the 2011 connection, you start to see that these bands are connected. They're woven together. Maybe not so much Sabbath and Zeppelin or Floyd, but as you experience other bands, you will see that there are some connections with that. Ozzy, as he embarked on his solo career, you'll start to see more connections from the 80s point of view, with Ozzy working with multiple musicians and collaborating that way outside of Black Sabbath. But yeah, Genesis. Maybe we'll talk about Genesis in the future, because they're, just Peter Gabriel in his own right is he is the topic. Like he's an incredible singer, composer, artist, performer, all of it. I mean, yeah, I'm sort of speechless trying to just even describe it, really. But his songs are incredible. And Phil Collins, it's the same way. He's absolutely incredible. He's a great singer and a drummer too, a drummer singer. So that's another interesting thing about these bands, is they all present these unique ensemble formats. With the quartet, guitar, bass, drum, singer being sort of maybe like the leader of the pack, I guess you could say, because Zeppelin and Sabbath were more well known, I guess. But then again, I don't really know. It's weird looking back on history. You just sort of have to infer that I guess maybe those were the popular bands. But I guess that's the point of this, is to record my perspective on the 70s from 2020. That is 50 years. 50 years looking back, and we're still talking about Zeppelin and Sabbath. Like how incredible is that, right? To make music that has lasted for that long. It's like, wow, like holy smokes, right? Where are we at? 1:06, 1 hour and 6 minutes. We'll jam for another 10 minutes, I guess. But I guess that's really all I have to say with those 5 bands. I felt really good. It felt really good talking about those bands because for me, the ensemble format was such a big thing, because if you're putting together a band, if you're putting together a band right now, what are you gonna go get? Like, who are you gonna have go play with you, right? Like, are you gonna go find 2 guitar players, or are you gonna get 1 guitar player? Are you gonna have a keyboard player along with this? Who's singing, right? Is the drummer gonna sing? Is the bass player gonna sing? Is the guitar player gonna sing? Because actually, the funny thing is that in each of these bands, the guitar player is not the singer, and that's a little bit more common in the 80s, like say with Metallica or Megadeth or other bands where the guitar player is the singer. But each of those bands, it's either just a singer or an instrumentalist playing. Actually, no, sorry, Dave Gilmour was the singer, so no, that's incorrect. But anyways, so that's a question you have to ask yourself. If you're going to put together a rock band or a metal band, or any band for that matter, who's going to be in the band, and what's the vision for that? Because the ensemble that you choose will dictate what you can do and what you can't do. Pink Floyd was able to do a lot of cool things because of the available synthesized things that they could do that Richard Wright was able to perform, and same with Genesis as well. But Zeppelin was sort of limited, and say Sabbath was sort of limited, just the 4 people on stage. Like Tony Iommi playing guitar, he can only do so much on the guitar, right? So that's just kind of the way it is. King Crimson was able to do a lot too, technically, on stage with a lot of the technology and multiple members. So you have to consider that. How is your ensemble format going to dictate what music you can make? And then ask yourself, who are your influences? Like, what pedigree are you going to tap into with music to make your music? Because you can't look at the bands that are currently doing the music you want to make. You can't copy them, because they're copying the fundamentals. You have to go back to the fundamentals. Sorry, I'm just looking at time because I want to make I think this is a really powerful message. You have to look at the fundamental influences and then go forward from there. You can't look at what the other band is doing in your scene that is in the same time period as you, which is current. You can't do that because you're going to end up copying the copying, and that doesn't make a good copy. So if you've seen the movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton, you don't copy the copy because it ends up being a little weird. Or, I don't know, shaving your tongue with the... we took the razor out so it doesn't hurt them. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that band that is the copy of the copy that basically just doesn't. I guess they're the you just pat them on the head because that's what happens in the movie. I'm not making fun of anybody. It's just that the copied copy guy he's kind of the slow one. So you don't want to be that. You want to be. You want to be as original as possible. At least that's what I hope for you. But I mean, I can't tell you to do certain things. I guess I'm just some guy in my mid-30s, and that's who I am. But that would be the advice I have: is go back to the fundamental primary influences. Starting in the mid 20th century. So look at the 50s, look at the 60s, and then look at the 70s. But your 70s is where you're going to see all that rock and metal start to really come to the surface. The 60s is still really good, but the recording technology changes as well as the gear changes, right? So the technology and the gear really kind of made the metal, I guess you could say, because you couldn't have distortion a certain way in the 60s. The gear didn't exist. You could only get certain sounds as technology expanded. So that's the thing, right? So go back, listen to those 5 groups, see what you can get from them. Go listen to all their albums. Yeah, it's going to take a long time, but it's absolutely worth it to hear all of those songs. And you're going to laugh because you're going to realize that there's certain things that you're hearing now that you're going to hear in these songs, which are just because bands are influenced from these 5 bands. And it may make you chuckle a little bit. Looked at the time again, sorry. May make you chuckle a little bit because I would hear things in these bands that I've heard from other bands after them do, and it's like, oh well, yeah, I guess they just copied or lifted out some concept of song idea from these groups, right? So you're going to be able to hear that and avoid those situations where you end up accidentally copying something, because that happens a lot. If you're writing original riffs or rock riffs, and you end up playing something that's already been written in a past time, but you've no idea. It's just something that you feel and hear. But when you hear those primary songs, you'll be able to manipulate them in an expert, masterful way to come up with something actually new and original. And that's what you want. You want to be able to be original and profound, I guess, or impactful. I don't know. I don't even know what's expected anymore of bands. But to me, what I hope for is to just see originality, really, and avoid being derivative, and only use derivative material if it's necessary. I guess if it's actually serving the song or the vision of the band. But yeah, use primary influences to make something new, and you'll go quite far if you do it that way. So we'll end it off with that. I'll sign off. I'm all tangled up in this. So sorry. Come on. So 1 hour and 13 minutes. Okay, yeah, I'm tangled up in this. My headphones, because I'm passing the mic back and forth, and the thing gets tangled up. Okay, so we're done. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Ah, man, shoot, I shouldn't have said that. Hope you enjoyed it. That's like the worst thing you could possibly say, because you don't want to ever say that. You want to say, you just want to say something else, because if you say, I hope you enjoyed it, it means that you may not enjoy it. So that's another thing. Never say that, ever. When you're introducing a song, is never say I hope you liked it, because you're saying you may not like it. So listen to this. It's the best. Yeah. Listen to more. All right, this is just gonna get goofy. We're gonna end it there. So I have to synchronize this because I have to turn it off, the camera and the thing at the same time. Okay, well, I enjoyed talking with you. This was fun. We're going to do it again sometime, and we'll see you next time. Bye.